It's not a joke when we say, Keir Starmer, be afraid, we will see you in The Hague. I will see you in The Hague. I will see you in The Hague. It's genocide, and the government is complicit in it. Not just complicit in it, it's providing political legitimacy. It's providing financial incentive, financial investment. The government is desperate for the people to not challenge that. It has been 14 months of constantly fighting for our loved ones to even be treated as normal prisoners. It's awful. You're not allowed to do it. It's illegal to do that for a reason. You don't get to just do that to people in this country, but they do. They get to do it with impunity. They are the backbone of the Gaza genocide. Elbit calls itself the backbone of the IDF.
This screams of scandal. It screams of scandal.
You don't just accidentally throw £2 million at a company. It's not like they don't know what Elbit is doing. But I'm going to say something that gets me prescribed, so I'm going to stop now.
The Filton 24, probably heard that name. This is a group of activists that have been arrested unjustly, some say, in connection to some direct action against Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli arms company. Now, these activists have been in prison, some for over a year, waiting trial, and a lot has happened since they've initially been arrested, since the first cohort was arrested. And to discuss the updates, the ups and downs, the journeys, etc., the stories, I'm joined today by a member of the Filton 24 campaign, Nuha.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So I guess we start at the beginning. The people are probably aware of Filton 24.
Yeah.
But it's not just the Filton 24. There's things,
it's changed a few times
Yes.
in the past 14 or so months.
So why don't you give us a kind of a rundown of what happened and where we are today?
So the Filton 6 were arrested on site at an Elbit site in Filton, Bristol. They are Sam, Lottie, Jordan, Ellie, Fatima Zainab and Zoe. They were arrested on site at what was called a research and development site. However, there is footage from inside the warehouse that shows that it is a warehouse, that it seems it is allegedly. A lot more quadcopters than would necessarily be needed for research and development. And they dismantled those weapons. They dismantled those quadcopters. We are already aware. I mean, we can go into it further about the effects of quadcopters and how they've been utilized in the genocide of Gaza, as well as the apartheid of the West Bank. But fundamentally, they found those quadcopters, those very quadcopters that we have seen in the footage that has come out of Gaza, and they dismantled it. And in doing so, they prevented a shipment of quadcopters going to Palestine, going to Gaza to then go on and kill people. So they've saved lives. So they were arrested on site. There's, I don't know if anyone's seen How to Kill a War Machine, but there is footage from inside where you can see the quadcopters. The nature of the arrest was unprecedented. They were arrested on site and immediately put under the watchful guard of the terrorism police. In doing so, the UN has actually called it enforced disappearance. So they were interrogated day and night for, depending on which sort of group of people we're talking about, up to a week. So they weren't allowed to have their lawyers. They were interrogated day and night. They weren't allowed to talk to their families. We didn't know where they were. It's awful. You're not allowed to do it. It's illegal to do that for a reason. You don't get to just do that to people in this country, but they do. They get to do it with impunity, because the second you say something is connected to terrorism, suddenly it legitimizes anything that you do to this person. It now becomes okay to assault them, to lock them away, to kidnap them, and also to deny them legal advice. So that was the first 6 who were arrested.
But before we move on, let's talk a bit about that, like the accusation of terrorism.
Yeah.
Like, how is it possible for the the courts or the police, prosecutors, whoever, the government, to make this claim, this accusation stick when it's at most it's damage of property?
Yes. So this is actually unprecedented. The equating property damage, private property damage, or whatever you want to call it, to terrorism, the government doesn't have a standing for it. It is trying to retroactively justify it. So the reason why they've managed to say it is because terrorism is a big scary word, and as soon as you say it, people just assume that the government doesn't throw that around willy-nilly, but it is just a political term. It's a political term, and what it is that the government has many contracts with Elbit Systems, ongoing contracts, previous contracts, future contracts. Elbit Systems is a vital part of what our government will throw money at, which is the military security industry. Elbit is vital to that, regardless of which political faction you're talking about, whether you're talking about the Tories, you're talking about the Labour, whichever contracts have been put in place with the previous administration, doesn't matter if you vote Labour, you vote Keir Starmer, they will still sign off on those contracts. And so there's also a very strong history of political interference from not just Elbit, but the Israeli government as well, with closed doors meetings between home secretaries and representatives from Elbit and other arms industries like Thales, and as well as representatives from the CPS, representatives from the Attorney General's office. And a lot of these meetings have, like, the notes from them have not been released by the government. They've been found by journalists, and they've had to be published by journalists because the government will not release any of that information, as well as documents have been released because they've been forced to. Activists have forced them to do so, but they've redacted them really heavily. So we won't even know the full extent of the government's ties to Elbit, except that we know that they have an awful lot of money on the line, and they have a lot of contracts and basically our government has proven over and over again that they're willing to invest in genocide. They are willing to give money to Elbit to experiment on Palestinians, to experiment in tactics of genocide. And our government is willing to call citizens who are imposing a people's arms embargo, because our government won't do it. They are willing to call them, and anyone who is associated with them, anyone who agrees with them, anyone who thinks genocide is bad, they are willing to call any of those people terrorists. Anyone who's willing to oppose genocide, they're willing to call any of them terrorists so that they can maintain these contracts. And the Filton trial is, if the Filton trial goes the way the government wants it to, there will be no way for us as a people, as like British people, to be able to tell the government, we don't want you using our money for that. We don't want you to give money to these companies because they are using it to kill people. It's not a negotiation thing. There is genocide, and then there is not genocide. The UN has said that this is genocide. You could have maybe, I won't agree with it personally, but you could have said maybe before the UN declared it genocide, well, we don't, plausible genocide is not the same as actual genocide. Whoever you are as a person, you could possibly say that. But it is a genocide now. It is a genocide now. You've declared it a genocide. So now at this point, that was like our backstop, right? The UN has now called it genocide. So anything that we are allowing to continue at this point is supporting a genocide. There is no, oh, I'm partially against genocide, I'm partially against quadcopters, I'm partially against the investment in genocide. No, it's genocide, and the government is complicit in it. Not just complicit in it, it's providing political legitimacy, it's providing financial incentive, financial investment. The government is desperate for the people to not challenge that. You can't challenge that because it's such a fundamental part of what our government thinks is good and right. Our government thinks it's good and right that they get to give money to people who experiment in improving occupational violence, genocide, forced starvation, the destruction of infrastructure, like medical infrastructure, doctors, journalists. All of that is fair game to our government, which is why they continue to give money to these companies. And it's not difficult for us to say no, except for the fact that you're saying no to the government, and they have all the power. So we've spent the past year having to constantly fight, whether it's the CPS, terrorism police, whether it's the legal system, the prison system, the media. It's on so many fronts that they are trying to create this, what's the term I'm looking for? Something consent? Manufactured consent. There we go. Consent. They're desperately trying to manufacture consent because what else are they going to do? They have investments, they have money on the line, they have lobbying groups on the line.
I mean, you've shown there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's so intricate, and the Filton case just becomes such a nexus for so many. It becomes such a point of inflection, for just everything in terms of Britain saying, like, as people, British people being like, no, we will not tolerate it. We will not participate in this. We will not pretend that our government is right, especially because our government keeps saying that this is right. So we have to, for our own moral and ethical reasons, do and say anything that we can
within legal means, using legal means within legal limits.
There we go, within legal limits. That's the term I'm looking for. The disclaimer changes every single time. So, but yes, within legal limits. And the Filton case is a way that we can actually do that, because we can mobilise outside the Woolwich Crown Court. Mobilising and public mobilising over that period of time for the hearing is really, really important, because the CPS get to control the information that goes out. And so unless we talk about the actual thing, like, because essentially the Filton 6 are taking the government to trial. They are taking the government to trial because the government continues to allow Elbit Systems to have exports and continues to allow them to manufacture quadcopters in this country. So really, the Filton trial is property damage the same as terrorism? We already know that it isn't. Is the government's investment in genocide something that the public will tolerate? And no. So as long as we continue showing up, that's probably the best way that we can. Well, I'm not going to say the best way that we can, but it's a way for us to mobilise. It's just an inflection point amongst all the other inflection points that we currently have.
Let's go back to the development of this case. So it started with the Filton 6.
Yes.
And now it's Filton 24.
Yeah, it's been a long 14 months.
Yes.
So Filton 6 were arrested on site. Then you had 4 more people who were arrested within a few days. So that is Maddie, Will, Ian, and Hannah. So then we became the Filton 10 within about a week. Again, enforced disappearance, armed raids on homes. So that became the Filton 10. They were then remanded to prison. They have been in prison ever since, so it's coming up to about 14 months now. They have requested bail multiple times because, I mean, it's property damage. You don't get to keep people in prison without trial, without them being able to make their case in front of a jury. You've punished them. And it has been punishment. The being held in prison is not an easy thing at all. It has been 14 months of constantly fighting for our loved ones to even be treated as normal prisoners, because again, the terrorism police has a massive say in the conditions that our loved ones are being kept in. So in terms of correspondence being blocked, in terms of books not being allowed in terms of visits mysteriously being cancelled or denied, we've had periods of time where they have just cancelled visits. There was I suddenly remember, I think it was December last year, Ellie's mum, Emma, was on her way to visit Ellie. And I think this was at Bronzefield. But Emma suddenly just gets a call saying, don't bother coming, she's not here. If I recall, it was meant to be their only family visit before Christmas. So this was really important to them. And on their way there, they just get told, but they get a call from the prison, just be like, don't bother coming. Why should we not bother going? Oh, because we've moved her. We've moved Ellie. Where have you moved Ellie to? We don't have to tell you. When did you move Ellie? We don't have to tell you. Why has Ellie's solicitor been told? We don't have to tell you. Ellie's solicitor didn't know where she was. So you can only imagine your daughter's being held in prison anyway, which is in its own circumstance awful. But now they just get to kidnap her again and just take her anywhere. It was only from public mobilization, the fact that we have so many supporters that we can tell and ask them to call and pressure the prison, that we even managed to find out where she was. And that was days later. Especially with the kind of physical violence that is allowed by prison officers against prisoners, there is actually physical violence is allowed to be used against them. So you get really scared because you don't necessarily know why they're being moved. You don't know where they're being moved to. You don't know when they're going to be able to communicate with you. That's hell. That is hell.
And this is without any actual sentencing. This is before
exactly.
any court cases.
On the suspicion, they've not been able to make their case to a jury. and when we really think about it, the one thing that our Filton prisoners are constantly trying to remind us as well is that this is normal for other prisoners. There are elements of this. There are elements of cancelling visits, cancelling money going in just because, oh my goodness, sorry. There was a whole story arc of Prevent getting involved with one of the prisoners. I won't say which one, but I didn't even know that Prevent was in prisons. I didn't even know Prevent was in prisons, but they're allowed to go into prison, and they're allowed to say, oh, we think that you're an extremist. We think that you've got extremist values, but you're not allowed to be like, I'm just anti-genocide, bro. Like, it's not an extremist value. No, being anti-genocide is not extremist, but by definition, they're getting to change it by using that terrorism designation. They get to change it, and they get to say that being anti-genocide is the same as being a terrorist. And it also means that they get to cancel your canteen money. They get to cancel your money that you need to then be able to communicate with your family on the outside. They get to reduce access to evidence. So our loved ones obviously are trying to prepare for trial. And their access to be able to prepare their own cases, it's an ongoing fight.
And this is not just about genocide, it seems. I think something's becoming clearer to me whilst you're talking about the experiences of the prisoners, is that this is also about the rights of British citizens in the United Kingdom and how they get to be treated if they are allowed to get proper legal representation should there be any interactions with law.
Absolutely. So there is established. This is direct action didn't start with the Filton, with what happened at Filton. That's not how direct action started. There is a long history with direct action. You've got Greenham Common, the Raytheon law in Ireland. Direct action has a very it has a very long history.
The suffragettes, for example.
The suffragettes. They still have statues of the suffragettes, for goodness sake. Meanwhile, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. Okay, or maybe I did know this and forgot about it. But they went down streets, well-dressed, breaking windows. Explain to me how that is something that's still celebrated, but you destroy a weapon of mass murder. That's bad. It's and oh my goodness, sorry, did you hear about, one of them, what was it, broke a window in the Prime Minister's house, and as they were getting dragged away was yeah, next time I'll be back with a bomb. It's Can you imagine saying that now? Can you imagine saying that with our faces? And meanwhile, now, but the Filton law are terrorists, because they took sledgehammers, tools for dismantling weapons that are being used not just to surveil Gaza, but literally sniper, suicide, and surveillance drones. They are the backbone of the Gaza genocide. Elbit calls itself the backbone of the IDF. They have their soldiers call themselves, their technicians, the ones who assemble these things in Israel. They call themselves civil soldiers. They are proud that they are in the briefing rooms with the IDF soldiers so that they can then reevaluate how successfully efficient mass murder is and discuss how to make it better. That's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And as British citizens, we can say we aren't going to give them money. We're not going to give them our money. No. And we're well within our rights to say, I don't care about your contract. I don't care about your contract. It's wrong. It's wrong and it shouldn't be allowed. And I mean, that's the thing that is so bizarre about all of this, because it does feel, I do describe this sometimes as a dystopian Black Mirror episode that we've suddenly found ourselves in, because saying, yes, there is 6 people arrested on site, breaking quadcopters, successfully disrupting the arms industry. But now we've gone from Filton 6 to Filton 10 to Filton 18 to Filton 24. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know by the end of this whole saga how many people will have been put on trial. And so if you can hold people without charge, you can forcibly disappear them. You can then keep them for 14 months. You can mistreat them over and over again, deny them bail over and over again. And you can just do that if you call everyone a terrorist, if you call them a terrorist. And until the trial, now 14 months has passed. Now the Filton 6 essentially get to tell the government, no, we've shown you that those quadcopters are there. We've shown you, we've got the footage. We've shown you that it's there. The Palestinians have shown you that it's happening, it's being used in the genocide. The human rights organizations have been saying since the 2000s that there is plausible evidence that engines being made in the UK, British engines, were being used in drones that were used to enforce the oppression of the West Bank. So, and, there's, Amnesty International testified in front of the government talking about this as well. This is something that the government has been doing for decades. And this is probably with the mixture of everything that's going on, with the mixture of the prescription, the mixture of, defend our juries, all of these different pressure points, this is probably one of the strongest times that we can actually say to the government, no, we will not allow this, because the people will not allow this. Yes, there is the battle that's happening inside the courtroom from November, but there's also the public conversation, the public battle, where enough people can hear about this. Because if you talk to most people and you say to them, genocide, is it bad? They will say, yes, genocide is bad. Mass slaughter, bad. Enforced starvation, bad. Destruction of medical infrastructure, bad. And then you say the tool for that, one of the biggest tools for that is the Hermes 450 and the Hermes 900, and these quadcopter engines and the tactical deployments as well, the tactical strategies that our government pays for. All of that is intrinsic to allowing all of this to happen. Anyone within any sense will say, well, we shouldn't help that happen. We shouldn't allow that to carry on. That's bad. But our government is saying that it's illegal, and we're not allowed to say that's bad and we don't want our money spent on it, because, well, then our politicians end up in The Hague. If it's not a joke when we say, Keir Starmer, be afraid, we will see you in The Hague. I will see you in The Hague. I will see you in The Hague, because you have allowed this to happen, and you have allowed this to happen with our money. And the Filton case is going to be, if we can, it's scary and it's incredibly daunting. They get to decide what we're allowed to say. They get to decide if they arrest us for something that we've said. Our loved ones are political hostages, so you're constantly terrified that something suspiciously awful will happen to one of them. But it has to be done. And, our loved ones would never let us give up on that. We have to keep fighting Elbit. We can't not fight Elbit, because fundamentally, Elbit, it's just a stepping stone. And I know that a lot of people could say, well, it's just a private company. Why are you so focused on Elbit? And it's just, it's just a corporate arm of the IDF. They protect themselves using financial law by saying, okay, it's a subsidiary, or it's, it's the UK branch. They get to protect themselves using private economic law. So fine, you're a private company. We don't have to give you money. We just don't have to. We get to choose where our contracts go. And sorry, I know that I'm talking in circles at this point, but that's essentially what the Filton case will allow as a stepping stone. It will allow, firstly, it becomes based on the prescription battle, because obviously Filton is being used to retroactively justify the government's desperate attempts. Filton wasn't the first time that the government was throwing around using terrorism legislation against Palestine Action. This is something that has been reported on, that there has been meetings between our government and the Israeli ambassador and staff from the Israeli embassy, and very prominent UK politicians, representatives from the justice system, etc. They were already talking about ways and means by which our government could protect Elbit, where they have had conversations where they have said, our interests lie with your interests to be able to continue, right? And what happens is that if Elbit falls, if we can actually stop Elbit, if we can enforce the divestment campaign, as people, as individuals, we are not invested in these arms companies. It's our governments that are invested.
Our taxpayer money.
It's our taxpayer money. So yes, we are part of it, but it's our government that's utilizing that money. So the only option we really have, because the arms industry is such a massive part of Israel's industry, like it's a strong economic factor within it. And they are committing genocide and they're profiting off genocide. We already know that Elbit Systems has raked in massive profits since October 23. And they are very pleased about the amount of profit that they've made, but they have spoken about their fear that globally people are turning against Israel and Elbit Systems, and globally pressure is building, which then makes it financially unviable for them to continue using or building these things in the UK. So yes, there's the ethical consideration of, do we feel comfortable with our pensions being invested in tools of genocide? But there's also, sorry, I'm going off on a massive tangent, but as people, we can't individually, like, yes, we can picket in front of Elbit. Yes, we can, write to our ministers and say, you need to stop giving Elbit contracts. But I'm going to say something that gets me prescribed, so I'm going to stop now.
Well, I mean...
But there is very strong, direct action has a very direct impact.
Yeah.
And allowing the government to continue to equate property damage with terrorism, we just can't allow the government to do that. What are we?
Let's speak about direct action for a little bit. So the Filton case has, made headlines, etc., and it's the most high profile, but it's not the first. It's not the first targeting of Elbit system specifically either. But it seems to me that the way that the government and the media, etc., have been dealing with this particular case is very different to how things were dealt with prior to October the 7th.
Unprecedented. Absolutely unprecedented. Even Filton, within post-October 23, the way that direct action was dealt with, the Filton case is the first time that terrorism and the connection with terrorism has been used.
Wow.
So even if a jury makes a decision of how when the sentencing comes along, there is a lot of freedom for the judge to decide. And it is very clear from how this whole process from August 2024, how all of this has proceeded. There's a very distinct pressure on all fronts, whether that's from the judges, whether that's from the media, whether that's from the prisons. And so, yeah, it's been very different, but Filton wasn't the start either. If you think about Bryce Norton, if you think about the prescription that took place, Filton became like that first little experimental throw that they did. Can you just forcibly, can you get away with an enforced disappearance? Can you get away with it? And they managed to get away with it. And then, can we make sure that they never leave prison? They can't go on bail. Well, they managed to get away with it. And Filton, and when you think about how direct action has been treated since then, Filton gets to be their little, if we test the waters, we test the waters, we test the waters. So realistically, it's always going to be an uphill battle, but that doesn't mean it should
prior
be
to
fought.
Filton, and this is like your point about the judge having extra powers, and this might play into it, because juries would go into a courtroom and there'll be a court case against people who took part in direct action against Elbit Systems in, I think, 2021, 2022, etc. And the juries would find the alleged, provocateurs, etc., direct actionists, innocent, because of the fact that they hear the stories, they hear the fact that, as you were mentioning,
I will say that was against the odds still. There are there's evidence of Elbit sending in solicitors, like trainee solicitors, to sit in the public gallery, and they're frantically scribbling everything that's being discussed by the CPS and the defense in the courtroom, and then the CPS suddenly deciding that actually the things that they called agreed upon facts, actually they need to argue that point. So they already had the agreed upon facts before they went into the courtroom, but then there is a trainee solicitor who's gone, oh, they've said something that we don't approve of, and then the CPS going, we need to change what the agreed facts are. So this level of political interference is not something that started in October 23.
Is this stuff documented?
Yes.
Wow.
it's actually a pretty consistent issue now within the trials. Not necessarily like we don't know how much it affects the CPF. That was a very obvious like thing. One event, then another event happening. But it is actually quite normal for in all of these hearings for them as best as possible to get to LBIT solicitors who aren't like lawyers who are there on behalf of LBIT, not on behalf of the CPS, not on behalf of media or anything, but specifically for LBIT, so that LBIT can then counteract what is said within that courtroom, because obviously once something is said inside that courtroom, it then becomes a matter of public record. Obviously after the trial's done, I mean, in our case, the trials will take 2 years or so before we even get to the end of the Filton 24, assuming that number doesn't become much bigger. But they jealously guard all of that information, because when that information comes out, there's a public outcry. When you think about Leicester, for example, like in Leicester, when that direct action happened, it was the people who came out and like blockaded that area, because when people find out about this stuff, they just say no. But because they aren't the politician, because they're not the one who like signs the check, what else are you going to do as a member of the public who says this is bad? But LBIT is becoming more and more brazen. It's becoming far more brazen and far more confident because our government keeps protecting it. Our government is actively choosing to defend genocide companies. They are actively choosing to, in my opinion, when you amount the medical neglect that has happened inside those prisons, when you think about family members dying, one of the Filton prisoners, his mum had cancer and he applied over and over and over again to get bail. And he was denied the chance to be there with his mum and take care of her while she was dying.
Wow.
That is evil. That's evil in a way that I cannot begin to explain. Can you imagine? You've been arrested in alleged connection to this thing, you've now been held on remand, and then your mother dies. And you can't, no matter whether you find him guilty or not guilty, you can't change that. That is a massive, you're destroying people's lives. There is a giant gap where all of the Filton people should be, right? There are families missing really important people who are vital in making sure that, anyways, so regardless of how it affects us as loved ones, there's medical neglect that's happened over and over in prison, denial of medication, denial of going to hospital when you need to go to hospital. There is genuine fear that our loved ones could suffer irreparable harm, that they aren't going to come back from. Illnesses. They get to do all of that without our people being able to speak to a jury and just say, yo, this is the thing. LBIT does genocide. We're against genocide. For the Filton 6, the rest of them are allegedly in connection. They don't even get to say that. And the government just get to say, yeah, you're stuck there now. You're stuck there now, and you're only allowed out for an hour a day, and even that hour isn't guaranteed. Sorry, I will go off on about prison conditions an awful lot, because it's been a very consistent fight that we've had to have.
This screams of scandal. It screams of scandal. I mean, over the last few weeks, you had the government, the media establishment, everyone and their mother has been screaming about the Maccabee, Tel Aviv, the whole debacle there.
Yeah.
When the police themselves made an assessment that these people are extremists and they are a danger, right? And then everyone was calling, anyone who would oppose them being an anti-Semite, etc. The entire media atmosphere was ablaze.
Yes.
And this is an actual scandal.
Yeah, I truly believe.
And they're silent.
Yeah. We do make jokes about the movie that will be made after this is all done, whether we're still alive. Because, there are elements of this that are farcical, just from sheer, a mixture of audacity and daftness. When you think, but also there is a lot of information that is not being released, not just to the public, but to the defendants themselves. And eventually, in how, when we look back at the suffragettes, we talk about the stuff that they did, the stuff they didn't do, how they were treated legally. A lot of stuff came out afterwards that we now get to look back on and go, oh no, the government treated the suffragettes so poorly. But doing that in hindsight doesn't mean anything. Doing that in 20, 30 years' time, that doesn't make us better. It just means that we get to say, pat ourselves on the back and say, well, we got through that all right, didn't we? It's like, no, we didn't. It sets a precedent for how our government gets to treat, what's what I'm looking for? Gets to treat
dissenters.
Dissent, that's what I'm looking for. The government, this is the thing that we dissent on. We dissent in our taxpayer money being used in a genocide. But then, we dissent to soldiers, genocidal, I don't even want to call them soldiers, but war criminals. We dissent to war criminals being allowed to walk around the UK. They don't have a right to be here. Well, like, what? They have a right to be in this country. They have a right to get through our borders. We don't have a right to get through our own borders. But they're allowed to be here and they're allowed to walk around free. Suddenly you get arrested for saying that that's bad.
Yeah.
If you say, well, I don't want the NHS to give all my data to Palantir and for me to have no right for refusal, that becomes dissent. Then, I don't like AI cameras being in Hammersmith. I live in Hammersmith. I don't want AI cameras deciding, like, tracking where I'm at. That becomes dissent. And if we allow this now, it all comes back to us. I know that it's a bit of a cliche where we're like, first they came for the socialists and I did nothing. But I mean, we're watching it happen. Now we've got people with placards, I oppose genocide, getting taken by police that are historically, Northern Irish police, regardless of how you feel about the occupation of Ireland. They are the only police force that are allowed to carry guns in the UK with regularity. They all carry Glock 19s. And now it's perfectly normal for us to import them when people are literally just standing there holding signs saying, I oppose genocide. And then, of course, there's a bit that comes afterwards. I'm not going to say it because someone will try and arrest me later on. But, like, it's Black Mirror dystopian stuff.
It is dystopian, yeah.
I don't know how else to express it. But, when Hunger Games. We talk about all of this stuff as, like, we talk about this as dystopian fiction, but it's happening in front of us. Automated murder, quadcopters, mixed in with the Lavender AI and the Call Me Dad. Was it called
Where's Daddy?
Where's Daddy? There we go. Where's Daddy? There's the one that targets infrastructure as well. It's dystopian stuff. They get to, and I was reading about Lavender the other day just because fascination with. There's been a dramatic shift. So previously, before October 23, there would still be some human Zionist justification for targeting. And they had to provide evidence. Humans had to provide evidence that this person that had been selected was a high enough target to justify, as well as their comings and goings, all of this stuff, right? And then post October 23, they have now automated all of that. And they automated that based on patterns, right? Patterns of whether you're in WhatsApp groups with other people that have been identified as terrorists, whether you are in the same vicinity as them, whether you've moved around a lot, whether you've changed your phone number often, whether you, all sorts of stuff. But it's a refugee camp. The whole, we cannot pretend that Gaza isn't what Gaza is. Gaza is under siege.
It's a concentration camp.
It's a concentration camp. And so when you decide that you're going to feed in information to this system where it's like, well, if someone is here, then they're very likely a terrorist. And if someone is here in these WhatsApp groups, I mean, if they moved around a lot, yeah, they're getting bombed. They don't have houses anymore. They are living in refugee camps that then go on to get bombed, so they move again. And so what happens is you've put in that data set, okay, you've justified it to yourself. We can have arguments about what's acceptable and what isn't, but they've already said that in terms of the program boundaries, they don't care whether you're a high target, whether you're a low target. They don't care whether you're a judicial worker. They don't care whether you are just part of the governmental, whether you're a bin collector, whether you were a bin collector, because it is anything that allows Palestinians to survive is.
And I mean, they don't care at all whether you're connected or whether you're involved. They'll just justify it anyway.
Absolutely. Changing your devices often. Yes, of course you're going to have to change your devices often. How often have you had to run away from a place and leave behind whatever else you've had there? So now it becomes living in a refugee camp is the same as whatever target we consider to be of value. And then on top of that, so they get to just have this automated murder. That then gets fed to these quadcopters. These quadcopters that either blow up themselves or go into a certain area and drop weapons, missiles, and bombs.
Or shoot at people, I think, as well.
And then they have their sniper drones that hover in the area afterwards so that they can then automate, like they can detect living pulses to shoot them.
Wow.
Regardless of whether they are a child, an adult, a doctor, a journalist, a Palestinian father trying to pull his child out of rubble. That is evil. That is evil. And while our government is desperately trying to talk about the Filton case, that is continuing to go on. We can talk about ceasefires and all of that, but those quadcopters are still there.
Yeah.
They are still there right now. And anything, yes, the Filton, I want to be optimistic and hope that, the Filton trial can stop this, but realistically, it's not just the trial, it's the entire mobilization around it. It is people arming themselves with this information and and going to their MPs' coffee mornings and saying, okay, well, you voted to prescribe Palestine Action. Well, this is what Palestine Action has shown. They've shown the evidence of these materials. They've shown you the invoices. They have shown those quadcopters. And yet you continue to allow Elbit to have contracts in this country. It is people who are willing to continue to picket outside Elbit sites. It is people who are willing to, wherever and whenever possible, say that I condemn Elbit. I condemn Elbit with every breath that I take. I consider it kind of patriotic to say, Elbit shouldn't be allowed here, because this is my, I pay taxes. I had a local government pension that is directly invested in the arms companies. And so
this is a company that is involved in genocide, and a government that is supporting genocide through this company as well as other means, and in contravention with international law and its duties. And these activists who have either were arrested on the day or have been arrested in
alleged connection.
In alleged connection. I mean, these are people who oppose this country, our country, the United Kingdom, being complicit in genocide. And I would say that is patriotic.
I think complicit becomes actually almost too soft a term for what is happening, because if we really think about it, the army training contract that has been in the media, the government already gave 2 million to Elbit just for them to develop the program.
This is to train 60,000 British soldiers.
Absolutely. And that investment was so that Elbit could develop this training program. Where do they develop their training programs? They develop them in Palestine. When we talk about automated AI controlled sniping of people, when we talk about those little cuboid pellets, when we talk about the apps that's you've seen the footage of soldiers scanning even children's faces so that they can develop a whole dossier on a 5-year-old, right? All of those tactics are basically our government likes these things. Our government thinks that those are good things. Our government thinks that tracking our faces and then tracking our medical data and I know, and this is the thing, you hear yourself talk sometimes and you're like, I sound crazy. I sound like a conspiracy theorist. The government's
I was just thinking that.
I do feel a little bit overwhelmed sometimes, because I'm like, it's not dystopian. It's literally happening. They're putting the money in it and then they don't want us to talk about it. Our government is happy to give them 2 million and then happy to give them 2.5 million on top of that. So you get 2 million to invest and then you get to experiment and make it more efficient, whether that's so that there's less lives lost on our side, or, more efficiently taking down medical infrastructure, educational infrastructure, anything survival infrastructure related. Our government gives them money to oppress all of that, to limit movement within the West Bank, to protect settlers, expanding their already illegal reach. All of that stuff, our government thinks it's great. Yeah. So talking about it being complicit isn't enough. Complicit almost sounds passive. No, our government is an active part of it. You don't just accidentally throw £2 million at a company. It's not like they don't know what Elbit is doing. They know all of it. They like it. That's why they gave Elbit the Watchkeeper drone program. Sorry, UAV engines. They gave them that. They are so proud. They are so happy. UAV engines, they were the ones who were paid by our government to run the drone operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those were our wars. We paid them. We were like, please do this for us, because we want to be able to kill people and you have the skills and the training to do it. So please, let us give you the money so that you can do it for us. So no, it's not just it. This is historic. It's something that has been happening for decades. It is something that the government has a lot of practice hiding. Whether that's by using things like national security and terrorism to talk about it. But our government loves genocide. And I think anyone who, that's it. That's all we need to be saying over and over again. Keir Starmer loves genocide. Keir Starmer loves genocide.
From the beginning, when he was in opposition and he had an opportunity to at least push back in even the most minimal way, he said that Israel has that right. She has that right to block food, water, aid, etc.
A human rights lawyer, bro. Human rights lawyer.
Yeah, I think you've said multiple times that this is what the government thinks is good, but I'm not sure the government even knows what good is.
No, because the thing is, the government's purpose is for it to continue in power. That's when we really the things that are great about this country, right? We talk about the NHS, right? The NHS are heroes, hands down heroes. Okay, during the pandemic, they risked their lives. They put themselves in active danger. They worked themselves to the bone to keep us alive, to keep this country going, right? Our government, the best that they were willing to give them was some pots and pans being on a Thursday.
Yeah.
What could they do with 2.5 billion? What can you invest in? The NHS, one of the few... Sorry, I shouldn't say one of the few things that I'm proud of in this country, but it is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And you talk about them being heroes. It's like, where do you want your money to go? Do you want your money to go into quadcopters that kill children? Or would you like to have an extra doctor? Not even with 2 billion? How much more resources could we have? They're out here pulling apart PIP funding. They're taking away, was it the winter fuel allowance? They are cutting the NHS budget. There is so much that they are taking and taking and taking from us. And not just from us, but from the most vulnerable people in this country, right? And that's all the Labour government have been doing. For the past for at least 14 months anyway. They have just clawed and clawed and clawed, saying that we have to, there's not enough money. You have enough money to train 60,000 soldiers every year? Based on genocide, you have enough money to give them genocide tactics so they can go, yay, we love genocide, we can do it more effectively. What genocide are you planning to commit, Keir Starmer? Why do you need that? Why do you need that information? Sorry, that's just my personal...
If I can play devil's advocate for a second.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah. The devil.
Sorry.
Now, whilst the British, maybe from the government's perspective, maybe they don't like the genocide, despite what they've been saying. Maybe they actually oppose it, deep down inside. Maybe they actually they cry at night. But for them, on the other hand, they are at risk of potential war with Russia, for example, right? And so for them, investing in these tactics of efficient warfare would secure national security.
It's not efficient warfare, though. When we think about Israel and Palestine, it's not warfare. It's genocide. B, it's occupation.
I mean,
so
from the perspective of the government,
but the tactics that are being developed are for your internal population, right? Israel desperately wants to control that entire area. They are occupying the Palestinians. if you want to talk about national security, what is that tactic actually securing us from? It's securing us from internal threats. It's not if we're going to talk about national security and we're scared of Russia and we need to be able to actively fight them. Firstly, I think England thinks a bit too much of itself. I think that sometimes that whole imperialism, the sun never set on the British Empire, Britain is so desperate to get that back. They are so desperate to be like an influential power player in all of this. It's not, okay? It's simply not. The British economy is based quite strongly on finances. It is based on finances, which means that the economies that make the most money, which includes the military security industry, the arms manufacturers, that's how we get our national security. We are making a lot of money by making lots and lots of money for it that then doesn't come back to us, that continues to funnel into that, because then they get to build all of that money up. And so that when they say that we need security, we can have security. Why do we need to have security that's invested in that, though? Because all you're going to get is more that. If you put money into that, that's what you get. If you want national security, then look at, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but think about times where Britain has done good things to protect our national security. I'm struggling to think of any. World War II, there we go. I mean, you can argue what the motivations for World War II was, but we can say genocide bad, and the UK government went in and stopped it.
Defeated fascism.
Really? Defeated? That's an insidious beast that we're fighting there.
Made it dormant.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just having like, there's a lot going on in the UK right now when we talk about fascism.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing. Like, this is not how, do you know what creates security? Being able to go to the doctor. I know that sounds really bizarre, but like, do you know what makes us secure? It's being able to get mental health support. It's being able to go to the doctor when you're sick. It's being able to, when you get unemployed, to be able to feed your family. When we talk about threats to the country, the only thing that is a valid threat to this country is people hurting each other here. People hurting each other here. Russia comes along, we live or we die. Are we going to have quadcopters in this country shooting Russian soldiers in the streets? No, that's not how this works. When we think about warfare, it's all non-soldiers with their drones in places of power. It's not war. When we think about Iraq and Afghanistan, that wasn't a war. They didn't get to fight back. We just killed them over and over again. But I think we can all agree that Afghanistan and Iraq are controversial. They are controversial. We already know that we went into Iraq.
Tony Blair belongs in The Hague for what happened in Iraq.
I'm sorry, that man, where does he keep coming from? Every time we think we finally got rid of him, he comes back. I'm sorry. It just, like, genuinely, I don't like calling people animals, but he's a cockroach. The entire world will die in a nuclear explosion and Tony Blair will somehow get paid to make it all better. I hate that man so much. I'm sorry.
Completely understandable crash out there.
But I mean, let's look back at Iraq, right? If you want to say, okay, well, we need to be able to have warfare and stuff. They lied to us. Why do we get to follow the government into war ever? After the Iraq war, after they told us about weapons of mass destruction, after they knew and they actively lied to defend the Americans, we've seen all of this come out. And now we're like, yeah, let's trust the government they can say when we should go to war.
The same government has also been participating in genocide in Gaza.
Tony Blair, Keir Starmer, much of a difference?
Not much.
No, the government has lied to us over and over and over again, and yet somehow we're supposed to continue to trust them, but we don't. I mean, if you ask any person, hey, do you think if the government declared war in Iraq tomorrow that, we can trust that they're justified? No. Right? It's just they've lost all legitimacy in that regard. The only way that they get to do this stuff is proxy genocides. They get to financially benefit from Israel's continued genocide because you have those corporate arms of the IDF, things like Elbit. Elbit's directors are Israeli. Yes, you could talk about Elbit Systems UK, but they have Israeli, and yes, you can say that it's a UK subsidiary, but its directors, as registered by, is it Customs Act? No. Company's House. There we go. Company's House. It's with you. You can see the directors on there, and so you can see that their literal addresses are Tel Aviv, Haifa. You can call them a UK subsidiary as much as you want, but if the money is going to Israel, if it's going to former IDF soldiers like Bezalel McLeese, what was he? An artilleryman, something like that. He's making money from it. So we're just giving it's when we talk about the Old Boys Club in the UK, we talk about how like politicians then become lobbyists, then go into the very industries that they were meant to be controlling, or that they were meant to be controlling with laws and making sure that they don't harm us all.
Yeah, I know the word you're looking for, but I also can't find it.
Regulate. There we go. They're meant to regulate all of these industries. But actually, we see it over and over again. They're the politician, they're meant to regulate a certain industry, and then suddenly they get a job either as a lobbyist for that industry or for actually working for the company so that the company can bypass as much of that regulation as possible, right? Get away with it. The very person who organized that regulation then gets in a position where they are being paid to circumvent that regulation. And that's in the UK. We've seen that. I mean, there are still people who need to be arrested for what happened during the pandemic. Money that was stolen from us over and over again through the pandemic, we still haven't seen proper prosecutions for that. When we think about Grenfell and the industries, the companies are specific companies that produced the cladding, that had an active role in the murder of 80 people?
Yeah.
The injuries, countless. People who are still suffering in terms of housing security, health complications. I mean, bodies weren't found, we still don't have prosecutions for that. And they are part of, by the way, the arms industry. They make aluminium, they make the cases of certain quadcopters. They make the aluminium casing. You can tell I've watched a lot of American stuff. But the aluminium casings and stuff. Same company.
It's all connected.
And so when we say that, yes, we need to talk about the arms industry, it's actually a very insular, self-sustaining space that we have very few means of disrupting. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that when it comes to Israel, the security industry is a massive part of Israel. Exporting that weaponry and exporting these things are a massive part of how it gets to continue to survive, how it gets to be able to pay for this genocide. Essentially what it does is, say, for example, like Americans decide to give a bunch of cast off Merkava tanks, for example, perhaps. And then the Israeli IDF will give a contract to a specific arms company to then retroactively make it more capable of harm, whether that is having greater firepower or having greater maneuverability, whether that is adapting the shell of the tank, or whether it a bunch of experiment and find out what works. And then they get to sell that on. They then get to make massive adverts from what is the Palestine laboratory. They get to make massive adverts of how well these quadcopters kill, how efficiently they kill, how quickly they kill. And then our government gives them money to do so. And the IDF and these arms companies, they are so intertwined in the same way that we talked about politicians and them becoming lobbyists and then them going into those companies. They don't even have that cover, right? Elbit Systems is run by ex-IDF soldiers. Unit 8200 came out of the IDF. And they are so intertwined. So yes, there is the private company Elbit Systems, but then it's essentially the corporate arm of the IDF. And hopefully the lawyer won't tell me off for saying that. But it is essentially just the corporate arm. They work hand in hand. The IDF make those requests, they make those orders, and then Elbit fills them. And then Elbit will fill some of those contracts in the UK, and then they'll do a little shuffle of their inventory. they'll do a little reshuffle of their inventory. They need to redistribute it. Or they will they will literally make it and then dismantle it into parts so that they can be like shipped over together so that they can then go to Israel and then be reassembled. So you get to say, oh no, we've only given them the dual use components. We didn't give them the actual quadcopters. But what you're doing is you're just giving them all of the bits, all the bricks that make it, and then they just assemble
Sounds
it there.
Like weapons laundering. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a legal term, but...
Let's go back to the Filton trial.
Yeah, sorry, we got off on a tangent, haven't we?
So the trial is starting soon or happening soon, right?
So we're mobilising on the 12th outside of Woolwich Crown Court. And then the actual trial itself starts on the 17th of November. So we're hoping for a big mobilisation because right now it can feel a little bit exhausting because we've been fighting this for like, you know, it's something new. You know, first we start off with the Filton 6 and then we have the Filton 10 and then there's the enforced disappearance and then there's the, you know, being held on remand. And then suddenly in November, like literally only a couple months later, it became the Filton 18, you know, armed raids, again, enforced disappearance, again, you know, being held on remand without being able to make your case. And then there was the prescription. I'm sure there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the middle of that, but these are just how I have to divide up the last year. Then you have the prescription, and then you have it becoming the Filton 24, and now we're still fighting the prescription, and now we have a trial coming up. So it does feel quite like we're constantly fighting this, but if we don't, how else do we get to do it? Because the government is slowly deliberately closing off paths by which we can dissent. So we have to really use the ones that we have. We have to use them loudly. We have to use them without shame. We have to be able to say, no, the government is just lying. Terrorism is just a label that the government gets to use to justify treating people without it legitimizes the government's right, like taking away your civil rights as a person. You know, the second you get called a terrorist, you no longer have free access. You know, you don't get to have access to your solicitors. It's really hard to prepare for a trial while in prison. And as we prepare for this trial, you realize more and more how prison conditions are designed to ensure that you are prepared as poorly as possible. And so you can't help but feel a little bit like, this is helpful for you, isn't it? It's really helpful if our lot can't prepare their case, if you make it, you know, if you make it really difficult for their lawyers to see them, if you move them around without warning, if you stop their correspondence randomly, if you decide that you're gonna cancel medical appointments on a whim, because they're allowed to do it to maintain public order, to maintain the prison order, but then you discuss, what does being able to have access to medication have to do with prison order? It's not. It's just a constant push by the terrorism police, and because obviously the evidence collection continues, and so they get to impose these conditions, but over and over again, and we have to fight it over and over again, but we finally get to take them to court. We finally get to, in front of a judge and in front of a jury, say as much as we can say, this is what happened. This is why it happened. This is the result of what happened. And now you get to decide whether that is a good or bad thing. And we talk too much about legalities, I think, sometimes, where we say, well, like, terrorism is a legal definition, or, you know, property damage is a legal definition. The government gets to choose what's legal and what isn't legal. The government gets to decide that they get to prescribe whoever they want to prescribe.
Yeah. Palestine Action is a terrorist organization, but the IDF, those committing genocide, they're an ally.
Yeah. Sorry. Sometimes, you know, you just like, yeah. If you don't smile about it, you will scream.
Yeah.
But it's very much true that they get to decide. They get to pick the playing field. They get to pick what you get to say. They get to pick when things happen, how things happen. They get to decide whether the prisoners even get to show up inside the courtroom. We've had multiple times where, you know, our loved ones want to be at their own bail hearing. They want to be in front of the judge. They want, like, if you're going to deny me bail, I want you to look at me when you decide to do it. And then just randomly on the day, the prison just be like, nah, not happening. Sorry, we can't do it. We can't take you. I don't know. We don't have enough staff. They never have enough staff. Prison, it's such a solid, like, they get to defend themselves so much by saying that they don't have enough staff. And then you think that we have private prisons. And but like I said, they get to decide even whether our loved ones show up inside the courtroom. And then when you think about what actually happens in that courtroom, this whole video link thing that they've become so fond of since the pandemic, they can barely hear sometimes what's being said by the judge about them. They can barely hear what their defense is saying about them. They can barely hear what the CPS is saying. And then when you think about the idea of you need to be able to see justice being done, you don't get to. And so like I said, a lot of what we talk about, we have to be very mindful about, because we have seen that when we push back, they push back, except they have our loved ones hostages. So they have a very strong,
So there's things that you can't talk about.
Yes, there are a lot of things that after all of the trials are done, I believe that there will be a reckoning.
Wow.
There will need to be a reckoning, because it's so frustrating not being able to talk too much like about the specifics, but like when you think some of the stuff that's come out declassified about, you know, secret meetings, things that have come out from Shadow World investigations about the people who allow these contracts to happen, and the lobbyists involved and the consultants involved. Those are all things that are in the public. Like, those are all things that are in the public. But because I'm connected to the Filton case, because my face is here, if I start talking about it, by extension, the Filton political hostages can be, their conditions change. So depending on how we have spoken about certain things, or we publicly said certain things, we've then noticed a very strong, I don't know if I'm legally allowed to call it a retaliatory crackdown, but yes, there is a, not just from the prison service, but from the terrorism police, from the CPS, and we know that there's, we can't talk specifically about recent elements of political interference in the case, but there are journalists looking into it, and as best we can, it will go into the courtroom for the abuse of process hearing, but they will get to decide whether it comes out into the public. And realistically, we're only really going to be able to see the full extent of how desperately the government have clawed onto their love of Elbit, how desperately they've clawed and kept hold of Elbit, and the things that they were willing to do to British citizens, the things that they were willing to do to us so that they can keep Elbit on side, and by extension the corporate arm of the IDF.
I think one major takeaway from this conversation for our viewers, even if you are completely dead inside and you've got no empathy for the Palestinian people, and you don't care about what's going on using British money and using resources here in the UK and what the UK is doing in order to enforce it, this is a very clear and unabashed attack on the sovereignty and the freedoms of the British people. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We are seeing... So, I mean, we're Muslim. The war on terror, we know in sort of the first decade of the millennium, the way that British Muslims were treated. You know, the sort of, you know, the infiltration of mosques, and like the, you know, the raids, the secret collecting of data, all of that. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's a whole history there that we are aware of, right? So the war on terror, and that somehow became acceptable for us as Muslims to be treated, our language to be monitored, our ability to practice our religion to be monitored, our political expression to be monitored. It became unsafe for us to say certain things. And now with this, we have seen that the government, all they've managed to do is improve on their techniques. And yes, it's people saying we are against genocide, and so as we will do what's within our capacity as British people to say no. But now we are seeing people standing with signs, getting, you know, I oppose genocide. They're getting arrested. When did that become normal? We can't let this stuff become normal. I mean, woman in Kent, right? literally guns pointed at her, and the police officers saying, "Oh, you're really lucky that we didn't just pull up in a van and take you." You think that's acceptable? You say that I should be grateful that you haven't kidnapped me off the street and held me under the Terrorism Act, and I should be grateful that you haven't forcibly disappeared me. I should be grateful that because I say genocide is bad, I should be so grateful that you haven't locked me up in a prison without remand and denied me bail over and over again and held me for over 14 months, potentially up to 2 years, and potentially having a sentence up to 10 to 15 years greater. No, I refuse to be grateful for that. I refuse to say that this is normal. It's not. And the Filton case is where we get to really draw a line and say that this is not normal. The government is doing this for very specific reasons. And fundamentally, if we can evict Albert out of the UK, firstly, you have like a whole set of other things that change, UAV engines, Instro, all of that stuff. But also, we finally get to hold politicians accountable. These people represent us. They're meant to be our voice, right? We're meant to be able to democratically elect them. They get to become, they speak for us, on behalf of us. And yet, the things that they are doing is atrocious. The way, it's atrocious. They get to forcibly kidnap us, all of this stuff. And sorry, I've lost my train of thought because I can feel myself sort of drifting off. The coffee is worn off. But fundamentally, this is the only time that we will really get to say our piece. And I know that, we're a little bit scared in terms of like preparing for the Filton hearing, but also we finally get to say in front of a jury of normal British citizens, as much as jury selection will allow, we get to finally tell the British public, right? Our people who have been extremely censored. What they are allowed to say has been so limited. When we think about how much we've been limited and what we're allowed to say, it's so much worse for them. They're really it's not safe for them to talk right now until they get into that courtroom, and then they can finally tell a jury. And even then, the judge still gets to decide whether there's a terrorism connection.
So you've mentioned about mobilizing as a method of people helping, people coming to the actual the courtrooms, or outside the courtrooms rather.
Absolutely.
A lot of people would want to do that, but maybe they can't for whatever reason. How else can people help?
So we are really lucky. I know I've already mentioned this, but we have a lot of ground supporters who are near the prisons, so that when there have been issues with the prison conditions, that they have they've mobilized for it. There are people who continue to picket outside of Elbit factories, and Raphael, shout outs to the people who continue to picket, because security is violent with impunity, whether you're talking about their paid contract securities or whether we're talking about the police. So in terms of, yes, Filton is an inflection point. Definitely contact your MPs about the Elbit contract, the Armed Forces contract, because there is already there are MPs mobilizing against it. So that is also a really solid place to do so. Also, the Filton the actual trial itself is over a period of 10 weeks. So yes, we're asking people to mobilize for the first day, because we need a really, really strong showing. We need but my point being that we'll need people to be able to show up throughout. So there will be different days where there's different testimony that's taking place, whether that's members of the Filton Six. So when Jordan does his testimony, when Fatima Zainab does her testimony, when Lottie does her testimony, and we will need people to mobilize on those periods of time, because you can hear the chanting from inside. You can hear it. And after 10 weeks of the prosecution just being like, you are evil, you are bad, you are terrorist, being able to hear that chanting from outside, it grounds you and it anchors you, and it reminds you of why you're doing this, because they want to isolate the Filton case so desperately. They want to isolate it from the wider push against the genocide. the wider resistance to genocide. And so mobilizing outside so that the CPS can see that we aren't going anywhere, and that every single time you try and mess with us, we will still be here, and we will fight you on legally fight you on every single point, every single time. We will not allow you to pretend that this isn't about genocide. We will not allow you to pretend that this is just about some innocent company that's just desperately trying to make a living. No, it's not about that. So we will remind you over and over again, yes, this is about genocide. Yes, this is about the UK getting to decide where taxpayer money goes, if that's sort of you're in to all of this. And to also to show the CPS that you can't get through all of us. Yes, you have our 6 loved ones inside the courtroom, but it's not just them, because every single one of us on the outside, yes, we didn't they didn't smash up quadcopters, but they don't think it's wrong. And the government is so desperate to make it seem unethical to do direct action. It's not. And no matter how many times you try and say, it's not going to be true. But unless we're the ones setting that narrative, unless we are constantly, whether we're showing up outside the courtroom, whether that's you showing up at your local PSC to send down a delegation for a specific day, PSCs around the country, whether that's talking about who the Filton 6, as well as the Filton 24. I know I've been very focused on the Filton 6, but we can't forget about the fact that this is a massive undertaking. But describing who they are, because the government would like to be like big scary terrorists, whereas talking about the fact that Jordan is a musician and an artist, talking about Fatima Zainab being a media student and an incredible poet, talking about Ellie being a forest school teacher. That is the coolest thing. And now that's the reality of who the government have locked up. That is the truth. They have locked these people up because these people are incredible people, but also they refuse to stand by and allow a genocide and to take place, but also that the equipment for that genocide to get to that genocide. So if we take the only thing that we can do is constantly push to, and even if it's just talk to a random person. Emma's really proud of the fact that she will try every single day to talk to one random person about her daughter, and she will introduce it as, yeah, my daughter's in prison, because it becomes oh my God, why are they in prison? We get trained to think that people who are in prison must be there because they're bad, and actually saying, well, no, they're actually a political prisoner. And this is the reason why. And talking to as many people as possible, because like I said, when you lay it out, genocide bad, equipment for genocide bad, we have the capacity to stop the equipment for genocide, do it. And the more we say it, the more we get to... The government just gets to keep saying it over and over again. They just keep being able to say, go, look at the terrorists, big scary terrorists, big scary terrorists. And it's no, that's just my friend Jordan, who refuses to allow you to use his money to let genocide take place. No, that is Fatima Zainab, who should have graduated last summer. No, that's Zoe, who should have started university. That's who you're really locking up. Mm-hmm. And so it's not necessarily, it's not about them as people, but it's about actively the things that we can do to effectively stop genocide, and the government preventing that as much as possible.
Not just stop genocide, also punish genocide, which is something that's not
absolutely
talked about, right?
I mean, right now I don't think we're even in the position to punish genocide right now, but we do have responsibility to punish genocide. At the very least, we can stop giving them extra money. At the very least, we can stop giving them money. We can stop doing the IRS surveillance flights. We can stop giving them political legitimacy by allowing war criminals into this country, on every single front. Whether that is denying their football clubs, no, on every single, even if you can't come to the Filton hearings, or you're not in London, right? There's probably an arms factory near you. There's probably MPs that you have access to who are voting in certain ways to make anti-genocide actions illegal. It is just finding your specific thing. Even if it's just guerrilla marketing of putting up a little poster that's just Albert makes quadcopters. These quadcopters have murdered this person, this person, this person. I don't care how you do it. Elbit needs to be exposed. Elbit cannot be allowed. Yes, the Filton case is one element by which we can do that, but on any front, whether that's picketing, whether that is trying to push back against the armed forces contract, whether that is telling your MP that if they don't stop this contract going through, then you won't vote for them. Yes, we're allowed to say, I care about the fact that you're using my money for genocide. I don't care whether you're Labour or Tory or Lib Dem or Green or whoever. Unless you're willing to actually stand on business, I'm not going to vote for you next year. And the Labour got in so easily, literally just being like not Tory. But now, because they're a year in, they're all comfortable now. They're all comfortable. They're on a little roll of, what can they do? What can they not do? But as, this trial is going to take it's going to throw into the public a lot of questions about where the motivations for our government lie, where what they think is acceptable and not acceptable. And the Filton trial is where we get to really focus that, but that doesn't mean it's the only thing. It will never be the only thing. It has to happen within a whole framework of marches, still doing the petitions, still writing to our MPs, still doing picketing, marching. We have to do every single one of those things, because if we don't fight them on every single one of those things, they will take it away from us. So yes, Filton trial, show up. It's a really good way to get to know other people around the country as well. Like the number of people who have come out to support the Filton campaign at the hearings. We've had we've had Irish contingents come through, like people trekking all the way from Ireland. It's incredible. And being able to know that it's not just our little, it's not little, it's massive. We have a massive little, extended network of family and friends, but also that it goes so much wider.
Yeah.
That really helps. It really, really helps. A lot of people hear the word terrorism and Palestine and they immediately just switch off. So being able to talk about, our taxpayer money being used in a certain way, talking about our pensions being invested in a certain type of way, in a certain thing, it's this whole, the way our government gets to profit from this, or at least attempts to profit from it, it's in multiple aspects of our lives. So whether that's the NHS and Palantir, whether that is pensions invested in genocide, whether that is the arms fair going to carry on. So yeah, Filton is important, but at any point where you can fight the government on this and make it so that Israel is not, I'm trying to find a word that isn't a swear word. No, my mum's here. But it is on every single scale, whether that's Elbit or Israel. No, just no. Whether that is, however that shows up in our life, because for some reason it seems to show up everywhere. I know that sounds a bit conspiracy theory, but they've gotten into the NHS. Palantir's gotten into the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, you do sound like a conspiracy theorist. I sound like everyone sounds like a conspiracy, but it's all real.
Episode. So we either get to decide, we either fight back or we just don't. We just get to go into this. We just go, okay, that's fine. They can continue to use quadcopters to shoot the brown people over there.
They'll never use it on us.
No chance.
Yeah.
It sounds less like a conspiracy theory when more people know the truth. We sound like a conspiracy. Yes, it's very dramatic, but it's all real. It's all happening right now. And the Filton hearing is one of very few chances we will get to fight back against this. And so it's all hands on deck. We need people to show up, not just on November 17th, but throughout the entire trial. We need people to continue to help us protect our loved ones in prison, because it's not just about the Filton 6. There is Filton 24, and there are other, political prisoners as well. And it's not just the trial that's taking place, but this is one of the few times that we will have this many eyes, and we need to use that. What's the word I'm looking for?
Momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. We finally get to hit a point where we get to call the government out, and we just need to be able to do it over and over and over again for a period of 10 weeks. And then once that's done, we get to do it for the next case and the case after that. Yeah. But we don't get to, because the Palestinians don't get to give up. And fundamentally, we can talk about all of this stuff. They are still using quadcopters to kill people. regardless of whether we talk about a ceasefire or not ceasefire, 80% of the infrastructure of Gaza is gone. We can talk about quadcopters all day. That doesn't change the fact that the malnutrition in Gaza will take generations to fix, if we can fix it at all. But yes, people are moving back into broken, like what's left of the rubble of houses. People are finally maybe getting to go back and unbury their families from inside what's left of their houses. Yes, we can talk about quadcopters, but there is nothing that will forgive us. We have allowed genocide to take place. Nothing will defeat the shame of allowing this to happen. And maybe one day history will look back at us and, you know, they'll probably talk about the Filton people like they talk about, you know, South African resistance to apartheid, talking about Bangladeshi liberation, talking about the suffragettes. They'll wash all of it. They will say, oh yeah, the government was fine, we were all fine. No, the people all came out and they all said that this genocide was bad and the government listened to them, and then the government stopped and everyone lived happily ever after. It's only people. What we need is as much record as possible to say over and over again, no, the government didn't give us this change. We demanded this change and we took this change because we pressured them so strongly. Because that's our right. That's how democracy works. You pressure your government to do the right thing because they are never going to do the right thing without that pressure. But nothing we do changes what we've allowed to happen. Nothing. But all we can... Sorry. It's a lot going on because we've got that whole ceasefire thing happening and Israel continues to kill people with quadcopters and such.
On that sobering note, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Nuha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And hopefully we will see everyone November 12th outside of Woolwich Crown Court, and then again November 17th outside of Woolwich Crown Court, and then for the 10 weeks with the 2-week gap in between. But yeah, any day that you show up, we would be really, really grateful.